So every time we get to the Hall of Fame, there's a lot of talk, and really just in general, there's a lot of talk about which quarterbacks are going to be Hall of Famers and which quarterbacks aren't, as we love to discuss quarterbacks in general because it's fun. But what I actually noticed when I was kind of going through some of the Hall of Famers is there's actually a very simple indicator as to who is going to make the Hall of Fame and who isn't. This isn't a perfect indicator, but it's shockingly very accurate. So let's get into what this simple algorithm is that can determine what quarterbacks make the Hall of Fame and what quarterbacks do not make the Hall of Fame. So this is the formula. It's a point system where the goal is to get 2 total points. You get 2 total points, you make the Hall of Fame. So first, 1 championship. Keep in mind, that doesn't have to be a Super Bowl. That could be an AFL or NFL championship where you were the starting quarterback. Also a first-team All-Pro, not MVP, because, throughout history, MVPs haven't always gone to quarterbacks. That's kind of a more new school thing. They used to go to running backs pretty frequently as well. So if you're a first-team All-Pro at the quarterback position, that is another point. And finally, if you lose in a Super Bowl, that is half of a point. So that is the total formula. There is one exception, which is if you have just 2 Super Bowls, but nothing else, no All-Pro, no Super Bowl loss, then you don't get in. Just if you're right at 2 points and it's just with 2 Super Bowls, that doesn't qualify. But that is the system, and it's shockingly accurate. Out of the 28 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, 27 of them have this, and almost every quarterback that I checked, out of all the ones I checked that haven't made the Hall of Fame but are close, do not qualify in this formula. There were only 2 exceptions I could find. These were the 2 exceptions. Warren Moon, who is in the Hall of Fame but does not have any of that, has never made a Super Bowl and was never a first-team All-Pro, and Joe Theismann, who was a first-team All-Pro. He was an MVP that year in 1983. He also won a Super Bowl, so that would, in theory, qualify that list. Again, there's a couple of guys who won 2 Super Bowls but did not make the Hall of Fame because that was all they had, was just the 2 Super Bowl wins. Theismann, the only guy I could find who has an All-Pro and has a Super Bowl championship and did not make the Hall of Fame. Weirdly enough, both of these guys played in the Canadian Football League, so maybe the rules are flipped if you play in the Canadian Football League. Warren Moon, though, I think it has to be mentioned. Yes, he did not have the stuff that usually it takes to qualify, but partially that was because he had to play in the Canadian Football League due to people not taking black quarterbacks seriously at the time. So he went over there, and in 5 years, when he won 5 championships with the Canadian Football League, he was able to make the NFL and have his career that way. So you wonder, would he have won a Super Bowl, or would he have had more had he just been able to enter the league like he should have been able to earlier, had teams respected him, and not been prejudiced against him. Joe Theismann, again, I don't have a great explanation as to why he didn't make it. But yeah, he was at least, hey, you're not going to find a system that is perfectly accurate. He was also only like a 2-time Pro Bowler, so it wasn't like he was like a consistently great player. I'm assuming the shorter peak is probably what factored in here. But okay, that's interesting. So if this algorithm is pretty accurate, well, what does that mean for quarterbacks trying to make the Hall of Fame now? Either those that have retired and are hopeful to get a gold jacket one day, or those who are still playing and maybe have some work to do. Well, first, let's talk about the quarterbacks who, are either waiting on potentially getting into the Hall of Fame or are still playing that have already passed this criteria. This is the list. Of course, Tom Brady blew by it with all of his championships and MVPs. Drew Brees actually does meet the criteria because he was a first-team All-Pro, even though he never won an MVP. So he does meet the criteria, and of course, he won a Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers won 3 MVPs. Ben Roethlisberger, again, does meet the criteria because he went to 2 Super Bowls that he won, and he also went to a Super Bowl that he lost. So that gives him more than, because again, there's that wrinkle of if it's exactly 2 Super Bowls, that doesn't qualify, but he has more than that, so he does qualify. Patrick Mahomes has won 3 Super Bowls and a couple, 1 or 2 MVPs, 2 MVPs, I believe, is how much he's won. And then Lamar Jackson, who has, 3 first-team All-Pros at this point, so that's enough for him to qualify as well. As for those who are still maybe have some work to do, this is the list along with their point totals. Eli Manning, the only guy with 2 points, but keep in mind, as I keep saying, if you make exactly 2 Super Bowls and win 2, that isn't quite enough. You need something else, a first-team All-Pro or a Super Bowl loss, which Manning doesn't have. If he had one less Super Bowl win and a first-team All-Pro, that probably would be enough. Maybe if he, at least in terms of the algorithm. Again, there will be exceptions, but interestingly enough, he was voted and they didn't put him in, and this algorithm holds true. Russell Wilson went to 2 Super Bowls, won 1, lost 1, never has been a first-team All-Pro, so that puts him at 1.5. Matthew Stafford won a Super Bowl, but that's all he has. Matt Ryan won an MVP, but that's all that he has. Joe Burrow, who has lost a Super Bowl, and then Josh Allen, who, this is weird, where I'm sometimes using All-Pros and MVPs interchangeable because they usually are, but not always. Allen weirdly won an MVP, but has not won a first-team All-Pro. So you could argue that should be 0. That could be a 1 if you want to. I probably would say that MVPs or first-team All-Pro should count as a full point, but that's just how I put it down there. And then Phillip Rivers was never first-team All-Pro and never made a Super Bowl. And I got to be honest, you look at how this is split with all these players, I don't think it's crazy to say that none of them get into the Hall of Fame. Like, that feels like something that I would, that probably would be the case, with the exception of Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, whose careers are still going and, maybe have some work to do. I think if they retired today, neither would be a Hall of Famer, but they're not going to retire today, so both have a chance, right? And again, you go over here, there are, everyone here also feels like they're probably getting into the Hall of Fame. Like, I think the closest one that might not would be Ben Roethlisberger, but I think he probably gets in. Again, Lamar Jackson still has a lot of career to go. Is he a Hall of Famer if he retires today? Maybe, but possibly. I mean, he does have the hardware at this point. Mahomes is definitely Hall of Famer. Rodgers, Breeze, and Brady are definitely Hall of Famers. So, again, it's a very simple formula. I think that's kind of why I'm so confused about it, because, it really isn't that complex whatsoever, and yet it's shockingly accurate. I should mention, there are undoubtedly some that I have missed. My looking at, what I did was to look at the quarterbacks who didn't make the list. There's no, this is the formula I invented, so there's no clear thing online where I can look at every quarterback who has met that criteria. I have to individually look at each one and figure out if they have. So I looked at a lot of list of best quarterbacks to not make the Hall of Fame and tried to find some that way, but it's possible there's a quarterback who somehow hasn't made any of those lists but did win an All-Pro and won a Super Bowl, way back in 1932 or something, and there wouldn't be a Super Bowl then, but won a championship then. I'm sure that's happened, so I'm sure this is not perfectly. There's only 2 exceptions, and if you can think of one, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, just an interesting situation, so figured I'd make a video about it. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.